All right, Chris, we're back for another episode. This is actually episode 18, if you can believe it. I'm just now looking at. Yeah, that's crazy. Bully Pulpit number 18. Bully Pulpit's growing on me. I do wonder if we'll ever change it though. Uh, some people asked me recently, what does it mean? I was
Bully
a little
pulpit?
disconcerted. Yeah, by that question, I was a little disconcerted by that question.
That they
Uh,
didn't know, or that yeah.
Well, that they didn't know because it's so often referred to, even on like CNN or Fox News. They'll sometimes throw it out, right? They'll say it, but also that like people didn't see what it meant for us was disconcerting. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
I
we can
mean,
come up with something else. Um, well, we missed you last week. I think I went a little bit on a tear last week. I gotta say, the story that really got me revved up was this Michigan State lawmaker who tweeted to what is his name, Hoekstra, the new head of the RNC in Michigan, Pete Hoekstra. Tweeted him a
yeah.
picture of some planes on a tarmac, buses on the tarmac next to planes, and said, "Where?" Basically, I'm gonna butcher it a little bit, but where are they taking these illegals with their police escort?
hmm
And it was a Sweet 16 game. The teams arriving
It's great.
at the Detroit airport. So I kind of went a little bit off on that guy for apparently not knowing that there were NCAA March Madness games happening in his home state. Like, what kind of idiot doesn't know that? Why aren't you at the game, first of all?
Yeah.
The March Madness has been crazy this year. And second, I love that he just threw his instant bias when he noticed buses on a tarmac where it was an illegal invasion.
Yeah.
Um,
Again, there's a famous political thing that it's okay to step on your dick. It's not okay to jump up and down on it. And
yeah.
those. I mean, it's been U.S. policy that that they fly immigrants that have crossed the border that are not citizens um, around the country. They ask you where you want to go, where you have family, and they fly you. And the idea that it's breaking news is, especially like Sweet 16. It's like normal people aren't fucking obsessed by it, and like a
Right.
lot of issues that people talk about. The politicians like to talk about. The public has a opinion on it. They're not going to move off it, and you gain no benefit by hitting it again. I mean, I always say it's like if you have a neighbor that you kind of like, neighbor moves in and he seems kind of nice and he takes care of his yard and he waves to you and he puts an American flag out. Seems like a pretty good guy, and you go, I want to go over see old Pete. Hey, Pete, I'm Chris, and how you doing? And Pete's pretty normal, except he was saying, man, I was out the other night, a lot of stars, and I think that there's probably intelligent life on another planet, not us. And you kind of go, yeah, I think so too. And every fucking time you talk to Pete, he's talking about UFOs and life on other planets. And
Right.
you avoid Pete and you don't want to be around Pete. And that's what politicians do when they talk about illegal immigration, when they talk about a certain point inflation, when they talk about, you hear Democrats all the time, they talk about, well, when Ronald Reagan, and you kind of go like, my man, that was that was like half a century ago. And it's like, when people do that, you lose credibility. And what's really interesting right now is that there are a couple of really big U.S. Senate races in the country. Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, Ohio, Montana, and the Democrats in every race, when you see their commercials, they're running as normal fucking people. The Republicans are all running as these weird kind of freaks. And so even though those states, the makeup of them should probably be Republican or Republican leaning, every one of these Democrats is going to win because the Republicans are like your neighbor talking about UFOs.
Do you think that there's a growing number of people in that camp, though? That's the thing
Yeah.
that when I look at news stories, like when I'm digging into it on Twitter or Reddit, and it's not an accurate sampling of
Yeah.
the American public, but I do wonder. I think that also maybe is a little bit harder at the Senate level because you're talking about the whole state. But the way that the districts, we talked before about the way that they gerrymandered the shit out of them and made it so that you can have basically a district of all tinfoil hat wearing people. And then you end up with a tinfoil hat wearing congressman. It's a lot harder at the Senate level, right? Because the Senate level, it's too diverse. There's too many people. You have cities, you have rural, you have this, you have that. It's too hard to do that, I think.
Gerrymandering is frankly, I think and we'll probably differ here. It's a little of a overblown reason. A lot of what people call gerrymandering, you simply can't get around. If you ever want to do it, actually try to take your home state, and try to draw congressional districts with 500,000 or 750,000 people. It is so difficult you can't even imagine. And I always talk about gerrymandering in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania had like a kind of a 5-4 Democrat-Republican split. 2010 comes around, it becomes like 6-3 Republican. The Republicans then controlled the legislature. The census came in, they gerrymandered it to be 6-3, 6-2 permanent, or 7-2 permanently. 2018 comes around, and it's a Democratic wave, and it goes 5-4 Democrat. And then the state Supreme Court comes in, and the fix was in that it was all Democrats, and they kind of came up with this crazy fucking new map, and it became 5-3 Republican or whatever the breakout was, or Democrat. But the dirty secret is, if you took any one of those maps and replayed every election, you would have exactly the same results.
Oh, that's interesting.
So if you took the map from 2010 and you ran the race in 2020, you would have the same results. So in the case of Pennsylvania, it is overrated. In some places like North Carolina and Massachusetts, it is underrated. They simply go fuck you. So gerrymandering, I mean, to actually to create a fair district, because do you want to create a district that is representative, or do you want to create one that is competitive? And so you would say, well, if you're the party that's not in power, you say, I want competitive districts. And that's kind of what we had for years because, and again, I'll take Pennsylvania, state I'm from. You could take the African-American parts of the state and allocate them to create more Democratic districts. So you would have a state that would be a quarter African-American, or a congressional district to be a quarter African-American, meaning it's almost impossible for a Republican to win that seat, but it's also impossible for a black Democrat to win a primary. And, the Supreme Court said, fuck that shit. You got to have stuff that's representative. And so you've got, majority African-American districts. But you had a lot more competitive balance when you could push those pieces around, which you can. And largely I think it's a good thing. And, and a lot of times what happens in districts that are severely gerrymandered, it's the leftover seat. So once you kind of divide all this stuff and you say, what do we do with all these voters? Let's fucking push them into here. And so you get this weird kind of thing. And again, it doesn't mean, having said that, partisan politics being what it is, they will go for every advantage and they will kind of come up with every kind of what the fuck legal reasoning and brief to file with the courts. But a lot of it is, a lot of what it is taking seats that were Democrat or Republican and making them more Democrat and more Republican. I think that's the problem, not gerrymandering per se, but the fact that there are fewer and fewer competitive seats.
Agreed, and I don't think that we're saying anything different there. And in fact, I mean, to your point about every advantage, I think the Supreme Court specifically said that gerrymandering for political reasons is legal, is constitutional, right? It's gerrymandering for disenfranchisement based on race or something like that is illegal or unconstitutional. However, potato, because if you say, well, you can't disenfranchise the African American vote, so what you do is you carve up a district that's 99% black. You say, no, look, they have they have a lot of representation there, right? Yeah. But really, if you were to spread it out among its maybe natural geographic boundaries, then it would be 50% black in one district and 50% black in another district, which makes that more competitive, to your point, perhaps. Only if we're playing out. Right.
And again, it's a complicated thing.
Well, you just motivated me for our next company, Chris, which is with AI now, could we have AI actually gerrymander the shit out of things and just say, this is the voter rolls, this is the history, this is everything, and you just carve up the ugliest districts, the craziest districts that are going to give all of us one way or the other control? Could AI do this consistently?
They've been doing that. They've been modeling districts like that for years, for at least 10 years. Famously in New Jersey, there was when they redistricted stuff last time. And this is actually a great, American politics story. So it used to be the legislature used to decide what the districts were. And under a Republican governor, Christine Todd Whitman in the 90s, she said, we're going to have a nonpartisan version of this because we're going to take politics out of this. And we're going to have a board with, I think it's 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and then an independent person. Okay. Sounds pretty good. Who picks the independent person?
Right.
So what you've had over the course, and usually they pick some fucking retired hack judge or some kind of person who they change their registration on, and it's always, and because Democrats have controlled the legislature, they appoint the Democrat, and so literally for 20 years, you've had all these one vote things where the guy votes. But the last guy, it's kind of, it gets funny and kind of sad because the last guy they picked was kind of senile and who admitted he'd never seen computers. He didn't know the states. He didn't know the districts. He didn't know the candidates. But basically they said, vote. And they had the vote and he voted, and the Republicans, because the districts are ridiculous. The way they are in New Jersey right now, they're ridiculous. They're unrepresentative. And it went out to the press, and he said, well, I don't know. I don't look at this. They just told me which way to vote, and I voted that way. And then it became a court case, and they didn't let him talk, but some law firm, filed this giant fucking brief on his behalf. And the court went, okay, But again, it was, when you see stuff that says this is nonpartisan, it is never nonpartisan because somebody is always putting their finger on the scale because somebody's got to pick. I mean, I don't know how you pick fucking
can you hear me, Chris?
Nonpartisan. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Does this have anything to do with I haven't dug into this story yet, but I think his name was Kim in New Jersey, and he just won some big against the county line or against something. Did you? Did you?
Yeah, that's a different thing. And actually, I lost to Andy Kim, and I did the race where Kim got elected to Congress in 2018, which was a really
Yeah.
interesting race because it was one of those races where my candidate had um, did a lot of controversial things, but he thought good things because he said, "I'm not coming to Congress to be a potted plant," and so he kind of waded into healthcare and he waded into tax reform and whether you like the results or not, but and basically he was targeted and he had over a year of negative run against him even before the race started. Um, and Kim was running these kind of shadow groups and was running like kind of resistance groups under different names. And uh, anyway, we lost by I think like 1,500 votes or a point or two. But
Mm-hmm.
so I'm still bitter about that, as you can tell. It's one of my most bitter moments. I've got like 4 or 5 most bitter moments in 40 years, and that's one of them.
It's
But
on your
no.
list.
So
It's on your list.
yeah, what happens in New Jersey is, or used to be, well, it still happens, that if you're endorsed by the party bosses, okay, you get what they call the county line. And the county line is the very top line. And the rest of the candidates kind of fuck you. So there can be 10 candidates there. And Chris Mottola is the choice of the Cape May County party bosses, and I'm at the very top. Justin is down, buried as 13 out of 20 candidates.
Right.
Tough luck. The rest is random. And so it's a distinct advantage. And what they did is they went to a court. And once again, because it is New Jersey and because the fix is always fucking in, the court said, nope, that's illegal. Democrats can't do that, but Republicans still can.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. But anyway, but so, but by the way, here's the argument for having that is because it gives control to party bosses who tend to be invested in their local party and in grassroots and in organization and all the shit that we say we want out of politics, that we want it local, we want it like that. No, we don't fucking want that. We want our guys to win. And so you could say the county line is unfair, and I would say, yeah, it's unfair, but it is certainly representative of the wills of the county party and the will of the county people, of the county activists, the county regulars. So you say, I want all this grassroots stuff. Well, literally a county line is grassroots. You know? And I think by getting rid of that,
that's really bottom up control, right?
Ultimately, and you could say these guys are corrupt and you can never get them out, and they're all kicked back. Yeah, okay, I'll agree with all that. But at its most basic, these are people who've dedicated their lives to the party and dedicated their lives to working in politics, and that's why they have the power. And I find that personally kind of equitable. That they put the work in. And if some Johnny come lately, his ass hurt because he didn't, fuck you. I mean, right?
Right.
I mean,
right. It's so interesting that we jumped on this topic, Chris, because one of our key points today that I'm curious what you think what kind of ripple effect this may have, was that, did you see the federal court ruled that the challenge to North Carolina's SB 747 redistricting could go ahead?
Yeah, I did see that, which is kind of why I mentioned North Carolina. I mean,
yeah, I thought maybe you did mention it. So let me ask you a question. So I think North Carolina is also, I don't know if this is against open me up to civil liability by saying this, but the kind of crazy guy that's running for governor in North Carolina that called
Republican
Beyonce a hooker or something, right? He's like kind of far out there. Yeah, so he's running for governor as the Republican there. What kind of knock-on effects if this is struck down? Because North Carolina is one of those states, I think most people would agree, is maybe a reddish hue of purple, right?
Yeah,
So
they have
what do you
Democratic
what kind
governors
of
and Democratic officials. Well, I mean, the problem is, and the problem with the whole thing is, they've just had elections. North
right,
Carolina just had their primaries, and
right,
frankly, I was involved in one of them. I'm still involved with one of them in a runoff, and so literally,
mm,
people could have wound up spending, forgetting time, people could have spent millions of dollars, and you're going to have a court say redo, which is certainly
wow,
unfair. And they're going to compress everything. If they compress everything, um, judges make terrible politicians, and they should referee stuff, and they should referee stuff early. But you have a case, and again, Pennsylvania, where judges who have their heads up their asses created this brand new congressional redistricting. And basically what they did is they went to their party bosses and say, how do we redistrict this? And they said, here's the plan. And they went, oh, okay. But the idea that, you've got a judiciary that is somehow above the pale in some of these states, especially when they're elected
yeah,
judiciary, is fucking ridiculous. I mean, I would much rather see the parties fight it out and have courts referee as opposed to courts deciding, and especially deciding in a non-timely manner. I mean, if you're going to do this case, don't do it after the fucking you just had an election. And basically
right.
you're saying, oh, do over. Basically you're saying do over. My side didn't win, or
Mm.
extra innings, or whatever
It,
you're doing.
I have to warn you, the stories that I've seen today, we're going to be in the shit for courts, because this is not the only one. Tony Evers in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
The Wisconsin Supreme Court is now looking at the 2022 ruling that made ballot drop boxes, banned them outside of the election offices. So
Mhm.
now we have a court. This is the exact argument that I read for why the court in Wisconsin shouldn't take this up, is that the Supreme Court ruled just 2 years ago what the law meant. And
Yeah.
now that the party control of the Supreme Court has flipped because of the seat that was flipped, now they're taking it up again. I'm a little torn, because if the first court made a partisan decision and it's recognized by the next court that it was a partisan decision, and they seek to rectify it, everybody can just claim that it was partisanship. One of the things I was thinking as I was thinking about our conversation today and looking at this story is, what was said in the article is that the law in Wisconsin is not clear on ballot boxes. So it's left to the court to interpret that law. Why doesn't the Supreme Court of anywhere, but let's just say Wisconsin in this case, to avoid the appearance of that partisan mingling in the activity on the court, why don't they just say it is not prohibited and it is not allowed? It should go forward now, but only for this election, and then it will be banned after that, because we think the initial ruling was wrong. But the legislature must redo this law, or the entire law is thrown out, because if it's not comprehensible, and you need 7 in the case of Wisconsin to try to determine what the law means, it's not a law. It's gibberish that is intentionally gibberish, so that you can then argue your way one way or the other, rather than just being clear. Why doesn't it specifically say what to do with ballot boxes? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to apply common sense to that. I mean, part of the other issue is going to be, and again, I worked with a number of Secretary of States who run elections or head of elections, and it may be too late to put that stuff in place. And so, I mean, because if you have a ballot, if you have a drop box, we call them fucking mailboxes, but that's a whole other argument that, it's a special thing because nobody has fucking mailboxes anymore. But forgetting that for a moment, but that has to be managed. The places have to be chosen. There's all this kind of logistical stuff that has to happen in the middle of an election year for a local, and it's all locally done, and it puts a burden on local elected officials to make this happen, or else they are opening themselves up to civil rights charges, potentially. So
Right.
I think part of it isn't just the courts waving their wand or the legislature waving its wand. It says it's got to be, how do we implement this in a timely manner? In one of the best, ironically, the two of the states that have taken the most shit for their elections, Georgia and Kentucky, have some of the best run elections in the country, if not the best run elections in the country, because they're modern, they're sensible, they were bipartisan, and people didn't like the results, in one way or another. But Kentucky, for instance, they had their election laws were supported by both the governor, the Republican Secretary of State, the Republican legislature, and the NAACP. Famously, Hollywood celebrity types didn't like it because they didn't understand it. And basically what they did was they made during COVID, they made it essentially easier to vote and harder to cheat, which should be the goals of all election law. Election law should be that simple. And the same thing in Georgia. Georgia, everybody was being disenfranchised, and we moved the All-Star game, the baseball All-Star game, because disenfranchised, and Disney's not going to shoot there. Georgia is now elected 2 Democratic U.S. senators, and they have the highest percentage of people registered to vote in the entire fucking country. I mean, if you want to,
it kind of takes away the steam from the argument.
No, there is no. I mean, the argument was stupid to begin with by people that didn't understand it, and it was primarily used because Stacey Abrams ran a shitty campaign in 2018 when she should have won, or 2020 when she should have won, and she fucked up a easily winnable race, and then Trump, she claimed fraud, and when it went to the courts go, what? I mean, basically, what's really funny is that her lawsuit was basically copied by the Trump people for their challenge in Georgia. And it was that there was all kinds of skullduggery and voting machines illegally switched votes and all kinds of crazy stuff. And again, I mean, but right. Kentucky and Georgia do it right. And Kentucky's got a very simple thing that you go in with a paper ballot, you mark it, it goes into a scanner, they scan it, and then a little sheet gets printed out that says how you voted that you can carry with you.
Right.
Pretty fucking easy.
Right.
Pretty easy.
Pretty smart.
And during COVID, because again, it goes to staffing, and because during COVID, they couldn't find elected officials to host polling places, especially in rural areas. They said, we're going to have a couple really big central ones. You can vote by mail. If you want to vote by mail, you can vote by mail. If you want to vote in person, we're going to have a couple really big central things. And people came and voted, and there were all these stories. Look at these lines. It's disenfranchisement. No, it's because you had 7 counties voting in one place. And they had free buses to bring people. I mean, again, it's not hard if you want to do it well. But it needs to be done on a nonpartisan basis. And then you need to have a press and elected officials who don't want to demagogue on the thing. But that's my hobby horse for today.
So let me ask you. So let's look at Wisconsin and North Carolina. Does this help Biden? If North Carolina, in the time that we have before the general, let's say, you're saying there's going to be a condensed kind of redo and all that, which might drive higher turnout as well. And then in Wisconsin, adding adding ballot boxes outside of the election offices somewhere else farther. Does that close the gap for Biden?
No. I mean, ballot boxes. I mean, ballot boxes are one of these kind of. I always say it's the smart argument for stupid people. It's one of those things, and the idea that you've got a ballot box at a certain predetermined location, but you can't walk fucking 50 feet through the door to drop it off, or you can't walk by a mailbox in your neighborhood and stick it in, and that somehow these magic boxes at locations are going to I'm going to vote. I wasn't going to vote, but now I'm going to drive and get my car and drive to the election headquarters and vote outside. It's fucking insane.
Right.
And again, presidential turnout drives presidential turnout. Nobody is going to not vote because they can't find a ballot box, a drop box, not a ballot box, a drop box. And again, I think that, what is interesting is the states. There's a good national survey out today by the Terrence Group, and you can find it online. Maybe we can put it in our show notes. I'll send it to you. That is a national survey, and it oversamples the key swing states. And so you can really see what's going on. And basically, you have a coin flip election. I think Trump's got a slight edge right now, but you've got a coin flip election. What's interesting from my perspective is how poorly the Biden campaign is running right now by making some really kind of fundamental mistakes. And you kind of want to go, who's in charge on this thing? As good as Democrat campaigns in those states are, and again, I think they're uniformly excellent for the Senate. I think the presidential campaign has been insanely bad. They're running. They had in Florida, for instance, they opened a Latino headquarters. We're not doing Latinx anymore. We're now that's been kind of people. After half a decade, people realized that was stupid. But they had it they opened the Biden campaign, opened the campaign headquarters in a non-Latino part of Florida. They didn't invite local press, and they picked a fight with the biggest Latino reporter in the state, and she fucking blowtorched them in a way that you hope that never happens to you, ever. And the headline was Biden campaign opens Latino headquarters with 3 gringos was the headline. But even in their advertising, the Biden campaign to Latino voters, it begins with inflation is down and prices are more affordable. If you want to argue that academically, God bless you. Good luck. When you look at Latino polling or working class polling or middle class polling, nobody fucking believes that. Nobody believes that because things are demonstrably more expensive. So one of the things in political advertising and or campaigns in general, if I'm going to tell you 3 things and the first thing you don't think is true, you're never going to hear the next 2. I'm sitting in LA right now, and if you say, how's the weather? And I say, it's snowing. It's incredible. We got 2 feet of snow. And, and then I would tell you, I've got the winning Powerball ticket or something, and you would never listen to it because I've told you something that is fundamentally untrue. So when you start off with it, and also the other advertising that Biden is running nationally also starts with this crazy stat is that the American economy is doing better than all the European, than any other European industrialized nation. And you kind of go what? Yeah, well, I don't live in fucking Finland. I live in Peoria.
Right. Why do I give a shit? Right.
And it comes off as but again, it starts off and then it makes some good points. But it starts off with essentially what most voters will see as a lie or a prevarication. And so it doesn't matter what else the spot is about because you've told me something I don't believe. And it is a classic when you've got kids running campaigns as opposed to people that do campaigns. For when you got White House staffer kids running campaigns as opposed to people that do campaigns for a living, you get mistakes like that. I mean, and again, it is a mistake I made very early in my career. You know, I could make a case statistically, and I thought if I could make that case, then I can persuade, and you can't.
I mean, I go back to, and I don't know if this is just my own biases, but it does seem to me that this is not indicative of a specific campaign. This is national Democratic strategy, in my opinion. It feels to me that this is no different than really, you know, anytime the Democrats have run as the incumbent party. It's no different than Hillary in 2016. It's no different than maybe Obama in 2012 is a bit anomalous to it. And certainly, you know, I think it's the exact same strategy as, or very similar to Clinton 96, but Clinton 96 actually had some like, to your point, he could actually say things that he had accomplished because we were starting to see a dot-com new sector of the economy. The economy was exploding, right? So he could say things are better, and nobody gave two shits about Monica at that point because the people's lives were doing better. But I think there's something about the Democratic campaign position, which is they believe everybody else knows what they believe, which is we're better than the other guy. So we don't really have to earn it. We don't really have to. It's almost a belief that it should be why are we even playing this game? It should be automatic, rather than positioning themselves of like the trying to convince. I feel like if they would start from position of trying to convince their most ardent opposition, what argument would resonate with that person? And then they use that as a way into everyone else. So like the most ardent person against them is going to be border issue and economy, right? Probably is going to be the two things that somebody's going to be against them. Why don't you just start by saying, we've done this, this, and this, but we care more about the future, and this is what our vision is of the future. And if you have one, if you don't have one, that becomes much more difficult. Am I wrong in that?
No, no.
I just feel like it's the same old. I feel like it's the same old playbook for Democrats. It just feels like the same old playbook. Is my point.
The two top issues among swing voters right now are the economy and the border. So the idea that there is this playbook that you're not going to talk about the border or the economy is fucking insane. But what you can say about it is, I acknowledge it's a problem, and here's the incremental things we're doing. So it's funny you mentioned Bill Clinton. Because there's a Republican pollster named Patrick Ruffini, and again, it's also a good show notes thing. I'll send you the link. And he posted the 1996 Bill Clinton reelect. And Bill Clinton started a year out. He started in 1995, and he ran on more police, more jail time, and gun control. So it was this this, what Dick Morris used to call triangulation, but it was 100,000 more police on the street, assault weapons, blah, blah, blah. We're going to jail more fucking people. And then he did the economy, and it was end welfare as we know it, and growing economy, put people back to it. So he would do this left thing, right thing, left thing, right thing, or right thing, left thing, whatever it is. And what they call triangulation with him in the middle. And the Biden campaign, and if you look at Sherrod Brown, if you look at Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, if you look at John Tester in Montana, they're running a version of that. Sherrod Brown now, who is a very liberal Democrat in Ohio, is running this terrific spot about fentanyl and illegally coming in across the border. And that's why President Trump signed my law. And it's a picture of Trump and Brown in the Oval Office talking to each other during this law signing thing. You could run that spot in a Republican primary and it would be great. This is a liberal Democratic senator running in a red state that Trump's going to win by 20 points, 15 points. And it's really kind of a remarkable thing that the Biden national campaign doesn't seem to get that. I mean, the kind of the crazy thing, and again, it's a minor thing, but it's indicative that they put out a press release, a perfunctory press release about that Sunday is National Trans Day of Awareness. And you go, okay,
I know.
Okay, and it always falls on March 31st, and you kind of go, okay, and it's one of apparently 145 LGBTQ plus days of commemorative week, whatever the fuck it is. It also falls on fucking Easter, which is the holiest day in the Christian calendar. And so nobody would say let this day that nobody celebrates, National Trans Day coming out, or 20 people celebrate, or 50, 100 people celebrate, as opposed to something that everybody's fucking celebrating. But it's just like, but it's like hitting your finger with a fucking hammer. Like, why? I mean, again, totally. Going back to the old thing, it's okay to step on your dick. It's not okay to jump up and down on it. And, what it did is it, ultimately nobody really is going to care, but it forced the White House to put out a fire, to backtrack on it. And they asked Biden about it. And Biden said, I never did that. And there's a whole series of like, well, it was a presidential proclamation. And it turns out some staffer somewhere was doing it. Some junior staffer. And,
right.
And I can tell you that if a junior staffer did that in the Clinton White House, you would have found him floating face down in the fucking Potomac. Because because basically you caused your boss in a critical reelection a bad weekend that didn't have to happen. And I think that is a real problem for the Biden campaign. I mean, with their financial advantage, I don't know why they haven't been on TV for over a year. Running a small ball stuff.
I got to tell you, I think you're spot on, but I also think that Biden's biggest problem in the middle is the border, not the economy. I think the economy is going to continue to improve. It's been on a trajectory. All right. So shy of some sort of black swan event, if it stays on the trajectory, I think most people are starting to feel, if you look at most polling, people feel more optimistic. They're feeling more optimistic about the economy. Right. But the border is still a huge albatross around his neck. That's at the center. I still think at his left, in his base, Israel is his big problem. Mm-hmm. And especially with the bombing of the kitchen, whatever it's called, the people recently,
the relief group.
And yeah, exactly right. And listen, I'm a pretty diehard moderate. You ask me about any topic, I could give you an opinion, and it could swing one way or the other, depending on the topic. I have to say that, like, I'm watching this like John Kirby dipshit give these press briefings, and I'm like, dude, you are just giving fodder for people on the left. You're feeding the monster. So it's funny that you mentioned the right and the left. I actually think that if there are a couple bold steps that would completely win this for Joe Biden, and one of them is dealing with Israel, and the other one is dealing with the border. If he just dealt with those two things, he wouldn't have to say, "I fixed the economy. We live in Never Never Land, and everything's all gumdrops and rainbows." If he just focused on those two things, and he is somewhat disingenuous about his bullshit of like Republicans wouldn't pass the bill. Yeah, but you undid some of the things from Trump. So if you just redo those things and now take credit for them, just do that. Right. And then on the Israel side, you already have the law on your side. And I just think that like it seems a relatively easy thing politically. Now, as a statesman, it's a different thing. And that's why I give a lot of leeway to people that are in these positions of power, because it isn't just appeasing their electorate. They actually have to worry about long-term repercussions for the world, right? But I do think that those are his biggest things. And I actually think Israel may be the bigger issue, because I don't know that a few drop boxes in Wisconsin are going to save him from the 20,000 of his core base younger people that may not turn out.
Yeah, and I think Israel foreign policy is more complicated because he's got not a lot of control over it. He's not going to control what Hamas does. He's not going to control what Israel does. That's just not going to happen. But what is fixable
but
is
there's the law in place, right? That if we don't have to send arms to Israel. What I don't understand is like the fact that like he has no control. I agree. I don't think it's right to blame him for a unit bombing the kitchen people in Israel, or what Benjamin Netanyahu does. What is his fault is that if it was Saudi Arabia doing that to another country and they were using American missiles, they would do something very different. And I think people see that hypocrisy, and that is his issue. His base sees that hypocrisy. His base sees in that you would never allow any other country to do this.
Yeah, I think
and
the
still
problem,
give them weapon systems.
I mean, do they stay home, or do they stay home? I would like to see some evidence of that. I think the border thing is a fixable thing, and it's an easily fixable thing. And you've got Democratic governors saying, "Will you please fucking fix this thing?" But I mean, there was a really interesting survey is that this week, 73% of the public is okay with the term illegal alien or illegal immigrant.
Right.
And it's, but you had, and Biden said that during the State of the Union. And I went, aha, somebody kind of beat fucking sense into these people that like use the language that people speak in. And then he went that weekend and apologized for it, which is fucking insane.
Right.
And all that says is that you're with the quarter of the public that's fucking insane on this thing, and you're not with the 3/4 of the public. And I think little things like that, like Bill Clinton never made those mistakes. Bill Clinton understood language. He understood all that and Obama did too. He understood that stuff, and which was really always hard to paint them as out of touch or elitist or any of that. It was hard to do. Yep. With Biden, when you're kind of falling into this kind of bizarre language thing, it is why. I mean, it's like Latinx. I mean, people, you were admonished, when if you did not use that language, and nobody fucking used that language. And one of the companies a company that does specializes in Latino issues. And we asked that thing, like, do you call yourself Latinx? And 2% said, yeah, we do. Everybody else would know, fuck you. It's stupid. Right. And you kind of go, okay, it's stupid. But, you kind of look at stuff. I mean, even last year they're doing Latinx shit. And it's just like, I mean, not to mention the kind of like to appropriate that language, the colonialism of saying, I know you've got a gendered language, but you can't use it now is ridiculous. Because we have a higher standard than your gendered language. I mean, it's fucking insane.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
We're talking about the border.
Yeah.
Actually, before the border, so we're talking about who's going to win. One way that I could see one of our candidates winning is if there's voter fraud on their behalf. And I have somebody that they should talk to. Kim Fong Taylor in Iowa. Did you see this woman?
No.
She was convicted of 52 counts of voter fraud, outright filling out ballots and stuffing them for her husband in Iowa, who won. She was facing up to 5 years per count, and she ended up with 4 months because she's a mom, obviously, and the patriarchy does some good things for women. But her husband, who was encouraged to resign, said, "No, I'm not resigning. Are you out of your fucking mind? Why would I resign?" I not for nothing. I do believe they are Republicans. I'm opening the story just to make sure that I'm right. Yeah, Republican activists. How
So much for voter fraud never happens. It never happens. Sure.
It's interesting to.
We've talked about this before.
It's interesting to
Voter
me.
fraud happens regularly, but it's always shit like that. It's not like this fucking grand. It's always stupid shit. I mean, in Philadelphia, right. we had a judge. He was a sitting judge, and you know he was stuffing ballot boxes. And again, if you've worked in elections, which I think everybody should do at least once in their life, you know, you see how hard it is to do that kind of stuff without getting caught. And so the idea that in Georgia that somehow there's going to be, I think that the original Stacey Abrams was 3 million votes weren't counted or some fucking insane thing like that in the state of Georgia, or that Donald Trump had, there were hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens voting in Georgia for Donald. What are you fucking people nuts? It's this goofy woman faking ballots. I mean, that's what on her kitchen table. After
you mean it wasn't bamboo in the ballot paper? It wasn't bamboo particles in the ballot paper because it was from communist China.
We should all be so fucking lucky that people are that organized. I mean, did I ever tell you my Obama story? My Obama Hawaii story?
No.
Okay. So when, again, I was working for John McCain, but previous to that, I had pitched a campaign during Obama's first race in 2004 in Illinois. And the Republican candidate, dropped out when it turned out that him and his wife at the time, who was actress Jerry Ryan, would go to swinger clubs. And so he dropped out. But I saw the Obama research document, the opposition research document, Obama. And you looked at it and you saw that he was born in Hawaii and that his father was not an American citizen. And you kind of go, oh, isn't that interesting? And then you see kind of that his date of birth and the birth announcement, there's like this weird timeline kind of problem. The researcher that did it, I said, that's kind of weird. I've never kind of seen anything like that. And he says, yeah, I think they thought about putting him up for adoption, which is why his grandparents raised him. And I thought, and again, I have no idea if that's true or not, but that was like, you kind of go, oh, okay, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Flash forward to but it was an interesting enough anomaly that you kind of go, okay. But there's, 2 birth notices in the Hawaiian paper, which is what they did, the Hawaiian Advertiser, and I forget what the other one was now. And so flash forward to all these fucking conspiracy nuts in 2008 going, he wasn't born, and it was, and you kind of going like, well, no, I've actually seen the newspaper. And they're like, no, they faked that at the time. And one of these nuts that I had to deal with. And I said, thank God. And he says, what do you mean? And the economy's in a meltdown. The economy's in a meltdown in 2008. I said, thank God. I said, it means somebody's in fucking charge and they got a long-term plan. The idea that somebody was planning this since 1960 means my 401k isn't totally fucked, right? I mean, it means it's good. Thank God, right? Whoever it is,
There's
they've
somebody
got
in
my
charge.
property. Yeah, they've got my and that they were doing they planned this out. It was a fucking half-century plot that they managed to keep quiet for this moment in time. It's like, thank you.
Right.
I mean, not 50 or 5, but 40 some year plot that they managed to keep quiet, but they've been organizing. It's like, wow, I'm glad. I'm so glad, because I thought it was just random clowns doing random shit. But yeah, so that's this woman. This is the big, election conspiracy theory. It's this woman, drinking Caster's vodka out of the fucking container at her kitchen table.
While she's filling out ballots for her husband.
Probably with the same pen. Or maybe she'll change pens or change hands or something. They do that. Exactly. If you've ever seen fake ballots, they're great because you can see it's like they all have the same signature, but like this will be a blue pen and this will be a black pen, and it's like you kind of go like, people nuts. Anyway,
I guess at least they made that much effort.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, but it happens. It's a fairly regular occurrence. I mean, in Kentucky, who I talked about how good their elections are run, they had voter fraud. I don't think this past election, but the previous election, but it was obvious these people were caught and they were prosecuted. And again, it was like on the minor level. It was like, a couple of votes, and right. It's too hard. It's too hard to do it on a massive scale. It simply cannot be done.
That is a perfect segue. A little bit of conspiracy theory mixed in. Okay, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Over under 50%. So yes or no, I guess. Or what percent likelihood is it that RFK is a Trump proxy? This is the new.
I'll go over 50. I'll go over 50 and I can't prove it.
I agree.
By the way, I
agree.
I got to pat myself on the back when we were talking about who he was going to pick for vice president. I said he's going to pick somebody
you
with
did
fucking...
say it. You said it 100%, and I actually gave you a shout out last week. I think it is a horrible choice, by the way. I actually said, why didn't he pick the dude who started like Rocket Mortgage or whatever it is, the billionaire in Detroit? Somebody who's actually well known a little bit, has way more money than this woman, and is in a state that he could actually do some real damage. I don't think he has any plan of winning, and I think this woman's going to get taken for a lot of money on the campaign. Yeah. Because I agree. I don't think his plan is to win. I think his plan is to get a cabinet position.
Yeah, I mean, he could be the secretary of insanity. But by the way, I am not convinced. I am not convinced that he actually helps Trump in every state. I think he probably helps Trump in some states. I think he actually helps Biden in Michigan.
Okay. I've seen some new polling recently that shows that he's taking a lot from Biden, and I wonder if this pick of Shanahan, Nicole Shanahan, I wonder if she's meant to kind of pull more from that liberal left because she's got her liberal bona fides, right?
Yeah, I mean, and will he sleep with her at some point? I mean, that's the other thing because I mean, you've heard about if you read all the infidelity stuff about him, it's pretty crazy.
How long till he and Cheryl Hines are divorced? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Because apparently he's got a zipper problem.
Yeah, well, he's a pretty hard person for me to take seriously, actually. I said last week that he's kind of the definition of the Nepo baby. Like I follow him on social media kind of because of the job. It's worse than every other advertisement. Everything he talks about is his uncle, his uncle, his uncle, his uncle. Man, that was 60 years ago, dude. Like, why are you still running on that? Anyway, that's my personal feeling about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to call out my own mistake. Last week I said that there was a 68% chance that the residents of Kansas City would give a tax, would vote for a tax to pay for a new Chiefs stadium and a new Royal Stadium. I just felt like Super Bowl champions, many Super Bowls over the last couple of years, that they would do it. And I got to say, the people really stepped up and surprised the shit out of me by voting it down by 58%. I was shocked.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? It's not often that they do that.
I've done stadium. I've done vote for the stadium, vote against the stadium. I've done those ballot initiatives. They are very difficult and increasingly difficult to pass, because people know they're kind of a scam. And
Total scam.
the great argument against is, why are we giving billionaires tax dollars?
Right.
There's always some the state or the city or the county is always going to be in for some infrastructure money. And sometimes there's land swaps, and those things are kind of like, people go, okay. But again, it is very difficult to make an argument that we need to give tax dollars to billionaires for something that we're not going to
100%.
control.
Totally.
And again, it's people are sophisticated about it, and there's always, by the way, there's always somebody's always got a study that says, this is the study that shows the economic development, it's a multiplier dollars. Hey, kids, speaking as political professional, what we do is we find some academic who's willing to write the report that we want, and we pay them. That's how that goes. And there was an entire so if you're an academic making 136 grand a year, I'm going to dangle a check for 40 grand in front of you and say, I need this, I need it in 3 months, and it needs to show that's kind of what happens, and that's how that works.
They're not being disingenuous, Chris. They just meant their own economic development
it's, and that's kind of how, that's whenever you see studies, caveat emptor, because generally they're going to be fake. Not always, but just most of the time. Anyway, I got to jump here.
All right, I will talk to you. Do you want to do one over-under? What do you think the over-under is on Alaska on the 6th Joe Biden Democratic primary? Over-under 91.2%.
Well, I'll take the under. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, the under.
All right.
Okay, next week we'll talk some more. Thank you. That's it for
Okay,
today.
brother. I will see you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.